Okay. Let's try and get this live stream on the road. Must admit, I haven't done one of these for quite a while. I've been kind of lazy on the live stream front. In fact, I think it was about 2 months ago I did the last one, which is not great. But you know, also it's nice to give a little bit of space and that. Currently, you know, what I'm most really excited and interested about in many ways is the 52-week journey course, the video course that I'm running on my website, which, you know, has currently got some 45 to 50 subscribers, and a lot of people making huge shifts through that. And I'm impressed with that because it was kind of an experiment to deliver content of this depth, you know, via a video medium. You know, traditionally we have workshops and you've got to come to the workshop physically, and you know, the therapist, me in this case, works on people along with the staff and all of that, and you have a structure and everything. And you know, certainly for a lot of people I know in the therapy scene, it will be, you know, to them it would make no sense whatsoever that you can create a lot of very deep personal change via a video platform or a video format. But nevertheless, that is what I'm seeing so far with this course, so I'm very excited about that. I'm also excited that my book is out, and that's selling quite well and all of that. And you know, I'm just enjoying still doing bioenergetics, doing it a lot, and just staying more and more present with my own body. Let me have a little look and see if I've got the chat thing up and whatever. I'm never really sure with this. I got this new phone. Sometimes it's a little bit strange. Kind of curious how it's even a Google phone, you know, a Pixel, but it doesn't seem to connect very well with other Google stuff. But that is how it is. Anyway, you know, so I mean, things are going well, really. Here in the UK, it's the summer. You know, we have the whole lockdown thing, and we're kind of coming out of that now. But you know, it's been a good phase for me. It's been a good phase for me to be more kind of, you know, not having so many people to cling on to in the outside, having lived communally for decades, basically, you know, to really be in my own space and have to take responsibility for how I move my energy, what I get up to and what I do, you know, has been a really good experience for me. I see someone's asking a question. Let's have a look. Hi Devrosh, thanks for your exercise that you post. I have a question about Reiki and breathing therapy. What is your take on it? I heard at some point low and abandoned breathing in frame of body work. I don't know what Lowen did with it, except that yes, he did move more towards body work rather than breath work. My own personal take, you know, regardless of whether you consider it Reiki and breath work or whether you consider it like rebirthing from, you know, the 60s and that American guy who coined the term and stuff, or, you know, Stan Groff and his holotropic breathing or various other breathwork schools, what I see with the breathwork is it can provide, it's a bit like taking drugs, you know, it's a bit like taking drugs, like good drugs, basically, or certainly drugs which aren't highly addictive and stuff like that. They can provide you with a very powerful, unique experience, but rarely do I see breathwork as a complete methodology for really creating grounded change within your whole being, you know, over time. It's more like something you can do to have a powerful release experience, or to get a real inner insight about something that's going on in you that you might not, you know, easily so see in your normal consciousness. Because, you know, Stan Groff, who's an interesting chap, I'm not sure if he's still with us, he may be. But anyway, he's an interesting guy, and, you know, he was working with LSD, acid, basically back in the 60s. And then when it was banned in Europe and America, like sometime around 1970, he was looking for something he could use that would provide people with a similar experience. He was working therapeutically with LSD, and he basically discovered, after trying this and trying that, he developed his own style of breath work called holotropic breathing, which he trademarked, and he used that. He used that to provide people with this deep, powerful experience, which could be cathartic. But the reality is, breath work is great, and it's good to do breath work. The reality is with bioenergetics, you're more in your normal frame of mind, and you can more slowly over time orientate yourself to clear things out bit by bit. We need that kind of grounded, somewhat objective focus. It's a little bit of a child position to think that breath work is going to do the same, in my opinion, which is a slightly controversial statement to make, and a lot of breath workers probably wouldn't like to hear it. But also working in breath work, I can see that it is true. Breath work is like taking a positive drug, a shamanic drug or something like that, and ayahuasca or something like this, and you let go of your normal state of consciousness and you go into a slightly different state of consciousness, and this can provide a release because your mind may be holding a pattern of tension in your muscles in your normal awareness, and that lets go, and so stuff can come out. You can have a cathartic experience, and you can also maybe get insights when you're in this altered state of awareness about what's going on in your life, what's going on in your childhood, all of this kind of stuff. But and so you can have massive powerful experiences with breath work, and then same as with shamanic drugs, and then people get totally into that. They get totally into that. I'm just massively into ayahuasca now or whatever, and going to see this shaman and whatever, and it's all good. It's all good. But over time you may find a repetitive aspect to it, and you're kind of, in a sense, giving responsibility to the technique or to the shaman or to the drug to change you. And generally this does not work well in the fullness of time. It may work very well for a period of time, but it's unlikely to work well over the long term, in my experience. So breathwork is a brilliant thing to do. I still run breathwork and sometimes Reikian sessions and that kind of thing, which is not necessarily so different, but from regular rebirthing. But it's not the mainstay of what I'm doing. It's not the mainstay of what I'm doing. It's something that it's great to do every now and again to really have a big release. Maybe I've been doing a raw bioenergetics workshop for 2 or 3 days, and it's like people are a bit stuck in the process a little bit. Let's do a big breathwork session for 3 hours and really let the energy out from a different angle. It's something you can do, but it's not a complete. To me, it's not really a complete methodology in itself. It places too much responsibility outside of the individual to create change. And finally, it is down to us. That can be a bastard at times, but it is down to us finally. And we may need to work on ourselves for some while, being directed by a therapist or a course or whatever, a shaman, whatever, to get to a place where we can really take responsibility for our own lives, and to a place where we can step ourselves up, where we can really bootstrap our own life. It may take a while to get to that. We may need the support of others, but that is where you want to be headed. I'm not working with people in the way that, say, the classic kind of psychotherapist from the 60s, where they've got the client and they come every week for the rest of their life to talk about their relationship with their mum or what's going on or whatever, this kind of thing. It's not the way that I am working. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm working in a different way, with a briefer and more kind of radical way. And at the same time, giving space for the individual client, most definitely. I'm excited by what's going on. I hope that answers your question. Anyway, I hope that answers your question. Feel free to follow up, and thank you for posting a question. I'm excited by what is being achieved by the online course and the level of change that people who stick with it are getting, and so that's inspiring for me, and it is. Okay, cool, thank you. Yeah, so bio is in full effect. It has a lot of potential. It has a lot of potential. Since I was just writing a chapter, a theoretical module for the course, actually, for later on success, and really kind of breaking down all the history of success, almost, looking at guys like Tony Robbins, Anthony Robbins, the motivational guru, and the lessons to be learned from his work, and also looking at the body, looking at these kind of things, and pulling it all together into one written piece of about 10 pages, which is part of later on in the 52-week journey. You have to understand the actual components of success, because that places more responsibility on you to move forwards. It gives you the tools, and it also places a responsibility on you to take it on, because that is a vital component, you know. And what was learned, like, by looking at guys like Tony Robbins, he could get 20,000 people together in a big arena and give them a whopping fantastic experience for a few days. But then, of course, for a large number of those people, they will be back where they started a month later. And it's, to me, it's like, okay, let's understand, instead of getting critical about what Tony Robbins is doing, which of course what he's doing is fantastic and amazing and radical and absolutely breakthrough, but it's to say, okay, but out of interest, all those guys came out of that conference, ramped up, pumped up, they're going to change their lives, they're going to do this, they're never going to collapse again. And yet probably 95 to 99% in a 1 month follow-up study are not doing so great. And so why is that? Why is that? And it's questions like that that intrigue me. In reality, probably not everyone can step up, but maybe out of 0.1% we can up that to 5% if we really start to understand the body and the mind together. So that's the kind of work that I'm doing. Okay, got another question. Dylan Blackshear. Okay, hey Dylan, doing Bioenergetics Daily for a few weeks now. I've noticed small imbalances, tending to naturally twist a bit during the arch or in other places. Only one leg wants to shake. Should I be concerned? No, I wouldn't be too concerned. If something's not becoming physically painful, then, and if it is, then you need to lay off a bit or do it for a shorter length of time or this kind of thing. But otherwise, I would stick with it, because the body has its own wisdom when it comes to unlocking itself. It is not running to the same script we have in our mind. It has its own wisdom, and you have to utilize that wisdom and allow it to do that. So you may find that one leg shakes a lot more than the other. You may find, that your body's twisting slightly to one side. All sorts of things like that can easily happen, and they're not really to be worried. It's like, keep feeling the body, keep breathing through the mouth, and keep allowing your own body to unwind itself. It's a journey. I've been working on some tension in my kind of upper or mid neck, for bloody ages, and at times my neck is getting more stiff, but at the same time I can feel change is happening. And so I continue with the journey. This body is a really complicated system, and it will not just unwrap itself because of reductionist analysis from our rational obsessed mind. There's nothing wrong with the rational aspects of the mind, they're very important, but it will not just go to the script. Bioenergetics is immersing slowly your awareness back into your body. So it's your whole body that's taking decisions. It's your whole body that's becoming alive. It's your whole body that's moving out into... Sorry, just eating some peanut butter. It's your whole body that's moving out into the world and changing stuff in your life and reaching other people. Let me have a sip of my tea. Where was I? It's like, so, you start with the bioenergetics and you just keep going with it, and you keep breathing and feeling your body. And what happens over time, over the 6-month yearly time frame, is you become much more aware of the specific areas where you need to kind of focus on. Basically, what I'm teaching in bioenergetics is to open 3 circuits in the body. The grounding circuit from your belly, down through your hips and your legs, down to the ground, so that you feel, hey, I'm grounded. Or when I need to be, I can be grounded. I can be really present with myself, with other people in a situation, and I'm solid, I'm there, without being rigid solid. I'm solid, I'm present, I'm there. And then we're also opening the circuit from the belly to the throat, so that you feel you have access to this kind of animal intensity inside, and you can bring that out when you need it. You can be in your power, And then we're also opening from the mind to the heart center, so that you can access vulnerability and feel okay with it. So you can just be open with people, so that you can create new dynamics in your relationships. It's very easy in life to get stuck, in a certain dynamic. Always like, looking at your boss or your teammates at work or your friendships or, lovers, a partner, in a certain way, and not really realizing, hey, I'm creating this dynamic. And as you release the charge from the system, so more openness comes, and it's like, oh wow, I'm going back into that. I don't need to go back into that. I can stay more open. And an immense amount of change can happen when an individual decides to take themselves on in this way. Okay, let's have a little look. So if you're watching and you've got a question, feel free to stick your question out. Stick it out. It's good to it's good to engage. It's good to engage with life, basically, and asking questions is a great way to do it as well. There's a lot going on in our world. In Britain, we've kind of got the old cheers, Dylan. Yeah, very helpful. Thanks. Just a side note, the lockdown workouts have been great, really helpful for me. Cool, man. Cool. Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to make those pay-per-view at some point, but at the minute there's still like 10 weeks of quite high quality free content there sitting on YouTube. So if you're watching this now or later, do check out the lockdown challenge. Look for Dev's lockdown challenge, and it'll still work even if you're not on lockdown. Don't worry. But that's a good chance. You get like a 20-minute workout that you can do every day, or once a day, and then when you've done it 7 times, you can move on to the next week, and that will give you quite a deep experience of bioenergetics, basically. And several people have been doing the Devs Lockdown Challenge, and they've moved on to the 52-week journey. And it's like it's great to see people stepping up and creating change in their life. Let me get a little bit more of my tea. People often ask me about, characterology and the Reichian thing and stuff, and my take is kind of different from a lot of therapists, that it's useful to understand, the survival strategies, the character structures, and to understand how we took them on and the relationship with the parents or other caregivers. But actually, everyone can benefit from more grounding. Everyone can benefit from getting more in their power. Everyone can benefit from being more okay with vulnerability, with openness. So it is actually not necessary to really overly pathologize yourself with these character types, or indeed with other structures from psychology. I regularly meet people, clients or people in the scene who, they've placed themselves in a certain box in some kind of psychological or spiritual categorization system, and it can be valuable as long as you're going to then move and work on yourself. But for some people, it also seems to become a little bit of a prison, and that's a shame. That's a shame. There's no need to really imprison yourself like this, though sometimes, maybe you need to for a little while to really get yourself to take action. Anyway, like I was saying, here in the UK, it's been a deep journey, and it's still going on for a lot of people, with the lockdown and everything. Got another question. Catherine. Hi, Catherine. I started 2 weeks ago with your video on deep grounding. Should I continue with exercises lower back in direction upper body, or can I mix the exercises? I can't remember which. I've made so many videos on YouTube, I'm not quite sure which one that is. But generally, when I'm working myself with an exercise, I'll often do it for like 3 months daily, 3 months, because, partly because I'm teaching this stuff, but also partly because that time frame gives my body and my mind a chance to really get into it, And I do find this approach much better than the kind of magic bullet approach. In the 52-week journey or on Dev's Lockdown Challenge, we do an exercise 7 times on separate days. So you could finish it in a week, or it might be a few weeks. But you do need that as a minimum time frame to work on. So, like I say, if someone comes to me and says, I've been doing the bow and arch for a month, cool. I'm not going to be like, hey man, that's way too long, you should be changing that now. It's really, really good to let your body really feel into a specific exercise for a decent length of time. That is really, really helpful, and it really supports long-term change. Jumping from one exercise to the next, as most of us do when we first get into this stuff, is actually creating not so much change in my experience. So I would say, have a look. If you want to mix the exercises, give it a try, but just bear in mind the the basic reality that I've seen reinforced over the years is that people who take the long, slow, deep approach tend to get a lot more change than those who need to mix and change things a lot, you know. My personality type in many ways is strongly capricious, you know. It's like, yeah, I can jump from this and jump to that, jump to this, jump to that. But of course, that can be useful in certain fields, but in self-development it's really not very useful at all. It's really not very useful at all. And I have to constantly work on the grounding and the discipline side for myself. I have to do that. Otherwise, I'm just going to capriciously flit or scroll through this or scroll through that or do this and do that all day long, and then by extension all week long or month long, and then of course not very much is going to be achieved. And so I might give myself a little bit of time in the day just to chill out on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to just let that take me over. I tend to do it, but I tend to organise myself these days now that I've got a lot of personal freedom and just living in quite a nice city in the UK. I'm going to work in the mornings at least, and sometimes into the afternoons as well, but I'm going to do that. That's my basic discipline on the weekdays and sometimes Saturday as well. And then it gives me like, okay, I've done my work, now I can go and space out or do this or hang out with friends or laze around on the seafront, whatever. So I find that works for me. We all have to find out what works for us, and there's nothing wrong at all with going through a phase of really working hard as well, whether it's on yourself or the job, or the job. I think it's really, really useful discipline for people. I see, like in the UK, maybe this whole lockdown thing we're going to hit. No one really knows. Maybe we'll just bounce back, or maybe there'll be a huge recession. But there's always opportunities. There's always potential. There's always learning in every situation. Thank you. I understand fully what you mean. Okay, cool. I'm glad I could answer your question, Catherine. Cheers. So if anyone's got a question, do feel free to put it out. I'm planning to do a few more live streams, really, because I know they get watched quite a lot afterwards, and people write in and say they're really helpful for them. So that's cool. Dylan, hi man. As I understand, the workouts are energizing and best done earlier in the day. But are there any bio exercises you prefer to do before bed to help unwind? Well, what I've found over the years, that's a great question, Dylan, by the way. What I've found over the years is like, some people can do bioenergetics just before going to bed and it's totally fine for them. They can do a bow in the arch, they can do, lion's roar, whatever, and then they just lie down and go to sleep. But they're probably only like 20 to 30% of people. And for most people, doing bio, most of the exercises will give them too much energy if they do them right before going to sleep. And then of course they won't be able to go to sleep. So what I recommend are more exercises are not so much energizing, but more exercise where you really feel into the body, where you have to really feel into the body. I'm actually, I've been a bit lazy with it, but I've been planning this developing presence meditation, which will be a guided meditation that you can just listen to for half an hour, at any time, but also before sleep, where you just guide it gently to feel into different parts of your body. And this is something you can anyway do. What you can do when you're, getting ready for bed, or you're sitting or you're going to lie down, is to just literally allow your breathing to just be however it wants to be. You don't need to do anything to your breath, but then feel into your body and look for an area where it seems to be something going on, like a bit of tension, a bit of activation somewhere, and just gently feel into that area. Just keep feeling into that area and try to keep your awareness not like hard locked in there, but like gently but present in there, And what happens is like a kind of feeling journey starts up at some point. It can be quite advanced, this technique. You need to have, if your mind is easily jumping away all the time, it may not be possible, but it's a really useful technique to start to ground you in the body. And anything like this really supports sleep. Likewise, if you get insomnia and you wake up in the middle of the night and whatever, there's some throat release stuff you can do, but then just feeling into it, maybe you don't need to do that, but even if you have done that, then just being able to feel into your body is very, very important. And just literally, you can try and feel into the whole body, that's one thing, but it's often easier to just look around for one area of the body that seems to be kind of sticking its hand up in, metaphorically, and just really feel into that place and see the kind of feeling thing that it's got going on there. And that can really ground your awareness back in your body. And then you find you just drop off to sleep real quick, real quick. Can be a very useful technique. I hope that's helpful. Hey Penny, how do you approach trauma recovery? It's a bit of a challenge. I have no bioenergetics classes around me, so I have to try a mix of this and that, but it feels like being your own surgeon. Yeah, I mean, trauma and trauma theory and physiology, neurology, psychology are all a little bit different on it, But what I see with trauma is that there's a physical component, which essentially is the holding pattern or the dead areas of your muscle system or body fascia. And there's a mental component, the way that you've lived your life or developed a behavioral way of avoiding going back into those feelings, So we have this behavioral mental component and we have a physical component, and bioenergetics is working to take that physical component out, basically, to release it slowly from the whole body, mind, the overall psyche. And so that's the basic approach, If you are interested, check out my lockdown challenge, check out the 52-week journey, which is a paid for course. You don't have to do the whole 52 weeks. You can just sign up for a month and give it a try, and then cancel before it resubscribes. And, over time, you will get the charge out of your body. And once you've got the charge out of your body, or a big chunk of it, the fear around the traumatic experience, no matter what it was, will start to dissipate, and you will find it much easier to make positive behavioral changes, whether it's in relationships or at work, whether it's just being around the world or whatever, So, there is real hope, I mean, right now, where neurology is moving, and polyvagal theory, which is kind of semi-accepted and not accepted, but doesn't really fully have, to my mind, a useful physical component that really integrates our understanding of how the past is represented in the body and blah, blah, blah. There really is the possibility to clear up a lot of the issues and energy of trauma, with slow, grounded work on yourself and taking a gentle, disciplined approach. Unfortunately, the nature of trauma, sometimes it creates a very, capricious, quick fix kind of mindset. And then this blocks things, this blocked me for a very, very long length of time. This blocked me. This need to kind of jump along for this, or, people go to different classes and different therapists and, jump in, jump out, and they're looking for a magic thing which will fix it. And for most people, probably a good 95% of people, they will just have to wait till they've done enough of that stuff and they find something which they can slowly focus on to create the change. But what I want to really communicate is that there is a lot of hope for people with trauma, but you do need to maybe move a little bit outside the mainstream of just regular medicine, and you can work on your own. The 52-week journey is created for people who want to work on their own, and the lockdown has kind of reinforced the conditions that we're surrounding us anyway, where the reality is you could be super into bioenergetics, but unless you're living in one of a handful of countries or areas in the world, you're going to find it very difficult to find someone that can support you and that you can do sessions with, even if you've got the money to do it. So being able to do work online is very useful, and it is fully possible. It is fully possible, because it does take time. You see, it does take time. If you were to work very directly with the emotions and screaming and shouting stuff and that kind of thing, which can be very useful to start to get a big chunk of charge out, but in the longer run, in my experience, is of limited usefulness, then you need a therapist. You can't go and do that kind of work just in your own room and think that you're going to be able to practically move your way forwards. It potentially wakes up too much emotion. It can re-traumatize you, though I don't fully agree with the use of that word. So, bioenergetics does offer real possibility, but you kind of need to be at the point where you can take responsibility, to try something and just to keep going with it at a depth which feels comfortable for you, altering it as how you need. But when you're ready for that, you can start to get change. I just look practically at the world, what's available and what could be available, as opposed to, for sure, there's a lot of other models, in psychiatry and psychology of how we work with trauma, but to me, it is possible to do it on your own. Ideally, you do it with a bit of group support or with people that you can check in with, but you can work quite a bit on your own as well. It is possible. A lot of therapists don't agree with that statement, and not purely because they want you as a client, but because they've not had an experience of it themselves, and it's not ideal, but what is in the world? What is? Thank you for your question. Thank you for your question. Cool guys. Yeah, trauma is like a big thing, and I think trauma, depression, and anxiety will continue to be big things. And with so many people having done this lockdown thing, it's had positive effects where people have had to go through stuff or maybe go deeper into a relationship dynamic when they could always jump away before. And also, it's allowed people to see, hey, do I really want to live the life I'm living? Do I really want to continue living in the way I've been? And so I do expect, that there will be quite an upsurge of interest in change, in personal development, in self-development. And, the good news is, if you're willing to drop the idea of a magic bullet that will just transform you straight away and to start to commit to, just a basic level, like half an hour a day, 4 times a week, if you're willing to commit to that level, over time, you can create a lot of change for yourself. You can create a lot of change for yourself. So that is, that's the good news. That's the good news. I like to get out and put it out, but I'm not working in the complete mainstream of psychology, So if you get to hear this, it's good news. But of course, it can't fully be shouted out from the rooftops yet. We don't really have, psychology needs to change. Psychology needs to change a lot, but that will take time. That will take time. I've made a few videos about the basic issues and the approach and the way that it developed to supply really the needs of one kind of demographic client group. And I've got my one book out now, and my second book, which I'm going to start writing soon, I've got it mapped out a bit. It will be to do with, instead of going all the time into introspection to create change and understanding the past, there's nothing wrong with that, but taking more of a brief therapy approach as it was originally conceived and moving out into the world in a kind of graduated way, using bioenergetics to support you to keep stepping up and understanding the mechanisms by which any individual can create a successful life for themselves. And that's not just about income and kudos and charisma. It's also about how successful your relationships are and, just how much meaning and satisfaction you're getting from your life. So, I'm going to be on it. I'm going to be on it with supporting people who really want the change, to create change and to look at new ways that content can be delivered. Simple as that. Okay, guys. So if you have got a question, do feel free to put it out. Hey, thank you, guys. No worries. Cool, Nicholas. Thanks for the appreciation. Hey, Penny. Yeah. There's a lot that we can do, to create change inside of ourselves. And it's like we're born into this world where we're given the obvious blame objects, the world out there, it's all the problem of it's Donald Trump, or it's Brexit, or it's Europe, or whatever Americans get worried about, the woke culture or whatever, all these bad things out there. But, the real journey is inside. And yes, to understand and use our emotional reactions to the stimuli outside, but to primarily use those to go inside and understand our own dynamic and to clear out the past. And then, when we go out into the world to create change, we create change not just from a reaction, I see a lot of people, quite young people, and I was totally like this when I was young. It wasn't quite the same culture, back in the 70s and 80s and shit, but like, when I was young, it was like, yeah, this is it, things make you uncomfortable and you assume that that's wrong. What I see a lot these days, people are talking about journalism and a lot of journalists kind of getting the sack or feeling like they have to move because another journalist says, I don't feel comfortable with what you're saying, and that's a great start place to come from. I don't feel comfortable with someone else's perspective, but of course, trying to change the outside, trying to get rid of that person or get them out of your sphere of influence because they bring up a feeling in you which is uncomfortable, obviously is not from a high state of awareness. It's not from a high state of awareness. The higher state of, you may need to put up boundaries, for sure, absolutely. But the higher state of awareness is to say, okay, what feeling is this person bringing up in me? And one aspect of a kind of woke culture which has emerged and going through our world, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, is that people just kind of go on autopilot, assuming that if they're uncomfortable with something, then that is bad and it should be stopped in the outside so that we can presumably create a more comfortable, fair world. But whilst I sympathise with this, and I think fairness is important to a degree, unfairness also gives the individual a powerful developmental challenge. And that's not an argument to maintain unfairness because, our world is grossly unfair and it could be a lot better. But it's important not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, It's important not to throw the baby out. And the baby out is that the development comes from the looking inside and understanding, on a personal level, on a deeply personal level, what the challenge being presented is to you. And so, if all you do, and it probably won't be possible anyway, is end up creating a very comfortable environment for yourself to live in, you're probably going to get pretty damn bored pretty soon, because not so many people really want to live just kind of surrounded in metaphorical cotton wool. It's not so exciting, it's not so challenging. And on the other end of extreme, we don't want to live in a kind of trauma-laden environment where people are hurling shit at us all the time, or where it's physically dangerous or something like this. But comfort is not the goal. That I might feel uncomfortable with something that someone is saying does not mean that the best thing that can happen is they stop saying it or they go out of my environment. In many ways, the best thing that can happen is I go on a deep internal journey with that, get the gifts from that, say thank you to them, and then either sort of take them out of my environment or become friends with them or whatever. It's like, that's the deeper journey. But of course, when we're young in particular, we don't so much notice that. I didn't notice that till I was like 39 years old, which is pretty damn old. Certainly it's a lot older than a lot of the people who are currently on the journey, not everybody, but I was a very late developer, so I had a lot of opportunities to really, live my own negativity and my own bad attitudes. I wasn't one of these guys who just jumped up on YouTube age 18 and made themselves $1 million, or £1 million, far, far from it. I was a complete mess on every level for many, many decades, and I had to simply live that and be in it and be in the reality of it until very, very, and I mean very slowly, I started to understand how I was creating it for myself, and then slowly start to take responsibility to create change with it. So it took me a long time, and just to get there, just to get to a place where I was willing to take the first step at self-responsibility of saying, okay, in this moment, I'm going to stop blaming the outside. I'm going to stop blaming the outside, and I'm going to look what's going on with me. And that took me from my teenage years over 20 years to do that. Enough questions here, I think. What do you think about Yanov's primal therapy? Well, I mean, primal therapy is it's a little bit of a confusing term because there's at least two kind of meanings that are commonly associated with the words primal therapy. One is therapy which looks at very early life issues, like even in the womb or in the first 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of life. That's one aspect of primal therapy. Another thing that people associate with primal therapy is screaming and shouting, making a lot of noise, and catharsis. And indeed, of course, Arthur Yanov wrote a book, very famous book, back in the 70s, was it, something like that, called Primal Scream, The Primal Scream, and then I think he did The Primal Scream 2, or whatever book writers call when they do a follow-up, maybe The New Primal Scream. But Uh, you know, screaming and shouting is great, and one of the things, and I trained in that kind of therapy for a long time with a very, very accomplished and professional school run by a guy called Varesh over in Holland, who's now no longer with us, but the school remains, called the University. And I trained in that kind of therapy for a long time, and it is great. And part of what is attractive to it is that because when we've been blocked for a long time, we often have the feeling like, if I could just cry my guts out, I would be okay. Or if I could just really get enraged and scream my guts out, then I would be okay. You know, those belief systems. So I get clients a lot of the time who say things like this, and of course, you know, if they come for a session one to one, we can do some exercises and they can scream, or maybe they go suddenly into tears and stuff, and it feels like a great release. But it is in reality only the first beginning of a step forwards. So in terms of you know, primal therapy in the sense of emotional expression or emotional release work, you know, it's great. It can start to take the charge out. I find bioenergetics to go deeper over the long run. That's my personal experience. So, you know, I'm not an expert on Yanov's work. I do have admiration for him, and I remember reading The Primal Scream many, many years ago and thought it was a great book, though I seem to recall it kind of presented things in a slightly magic bullet way. I could be a little bit wrong now, but he had this young male client who one day in a session made this huge scream, and then he was just so much better. And to me, that does set up what's likely to be a fairly unrealistic expectation, you know, if I'm remembering it correct. But you know, the bottom line for me with therapy and therapists generally is that, like, you know, our world is in such a mess. You know, any level of therapy is good basically, and I don't want to lower myself, or maybe not lower myself, but I don't want to just be kind of, oh, that therapist's not so good, or this one's not so good, or you know, this style of therapy is no good. I see people doing this and I don't think it's really useful, and I don't want to do it myself basically, because you know, therapy in many ways is a drop in the ocean of what humanity needs and what society needs. You know, so anyone who's out there offering something, I think, is good. Anything that's offering something valid, whether it's, you know, Reiki, or whether it's psychoanalysis, or whether it's primal screaming and shouting, or whether it's bioenergetics, whether it's dance therapy, sound therapy, underwater being rocked therapy, you know, whatever they're offering, I think is valid. And what's a kind of shame is where the kind of competitive or judgmental instinct comes on, and people are like, oh, this therapy is good and this one's no good and whatever. You know, you can probably get benefit from any therapy, and it's good to try different stuff. And at some point, yes, you will need to focus on something if you want to make change. So, you know, I think Arthur Yanov brought, you know, he brought stuff to the attention of the world in the same way that, you know, the concept of an unconscious mind was certainly well established at least 50 years before Freud wrote The Interpretation of Dreams in like 1895 or something, you know, and Freud brought it out. You know, he wrote a book which touched millions of people in Europe. And so, you know, then it became well known out in the world. And in the same way, you know, Yanov brought this kind of therapy out into the world. And I think he's still got a school, maybe in Sedona, in Arizona, I think, something like that. I don't know so much about it. A chap I do respect a lot, who was running workshops, also spent some time there and said it was really, really good work for him. So I actually don't know. I think Arthur Yanov has passed away now. There was a famous story I heard about Arthur Yanov, which was like, he went to, I think he was doing a talk at the Roundhouse in Camden, that's part of North London, back in the 80s or something, you know, when he was kind of becoming famous. And it was kind of a very experimental, radical time. You know, the Bhagwan Osho was about. A lot of people were into him and his deep vision. You know, this is the kind of the age of society that was really getting into therapy and experimental lifestyles. And so, I can't remember, but Yanov walks on stage. Everyone's been waiting for him, you know, for quite a while. And Yanov walks on stage, and someone immediately starts giving him shit about, you know, how long he's had to wait for Arthur Yanov to speak. So Yanov listens to this and just walks off stage again. And basically, and the guy who told me this story said he really learned a big lesson from it, that you don't need to take this kind of nonsense from people. You don't need to take it, you know, you don't need to swallow it and apologize. If you've got, you know, you don't need to do this. You can walk out and, you know, maybe people feel upset. And in today's world, yeah, something got cut off there, but, you know, you can, you know, you don't have to take a lot of rubbish, you know, and if someone is doing something you don't like, you don't necessarily have to stay with it. And this guy who saw Yanov do that, who'd gone to, you know, listen to after Yanov to give his 2 hour talk on therapy, and, you know, you don't know, because your question that you're kind of a little bit nervous about asking or whatever might really, really support someone else who watches this stream later, you know, and so it's good to put stuff out. It's good to put stuff out. So let's see. I'm looking forward to the rest of the summer. I'm off camping tomorrow with my girlfriend, and it's good to get out into nature a bit. And I've been quite good in the last week of, I took myself off the phone, you know. I was getting too locked into the phone and the computer, so I took myself off for a few days, and I was kind of impressed that I could do that relatively easily. You know, there's the kind of, oh, I want to check something feeling, but say, no, let's not do that. Let's just stay present with myself, or do something, you know, a bit more nourishing for myself. So I was happy that I could do that. Okay guys, let's just get a couple more minutes. If you've got a question that you know is sitting there, then feel free to just put it out. Otherwise I'll bring this stream to a close. But it is my intention to do a couple of live streams a month, you know, and to build those up again. Do check out my new book, do a little bit of advertising, which, you know, it's got like 95 exercises in it, so you can really, you know, for the price of this book, 20 quid, you can learn an awful lot about bioenergetics. And it's got, you know, a bit of theory written quite gently, you know, not complicated psychiatric language and stuff to get started with. And, you know, I am trying to really put out a new way of looking at the mind and the body. You know, I think we've gone deep enough in our world into the just purely the rational intellect, and it's cool, but it's not really working. It's not really working for the planet. It's not really working in science and medicine. It's not really working in commerce. You know, there has to come a more embodied wisdom, and that has to come out of us. It has to come out of a vanguard of people who do the work and then take the work and their own, you know, perspectives out into the world. Because as you do this work, you find your own individual mission, you know. If you follow the 52-week journey, the intention is not that, you know, you come out thinking like me. No, it's not like that at all. You come out thinking like the authentic you. That's the intention. It's not me trying to program you with certain beliefs or certain behaviors at all. It is supporting you to come out, whether you want to be a bioenergetic therapist or whether you're just using this so that you can step up and be more functional in whatever gift that you want to bring to the world. But, you know, what I'm seeing is that there are new world leaders emerging, you know, in the background, even on YouTube, you know, there are. And it's like, okay, you know, are you going to be the next one? Are you going to take the challenge to go deep enough into yourself that you can bring out and crystallize something that's purely you? You know, because bioenergetics can really support you with that. Simply because all it's doing is taking out the blocks. It doesn't need to recondition your mind in any way. All the other therapy I did when I was younger, there was always an element of reconditioning in it, getting you to think differently and think in a formatted way. And I kind of resisted that. I don't know exactly, maybe it's my own trip, but I kind of resisted that part of it. I could see its value at times, and certainly for people from very dysfunctional backgrounds, and I've been dysfunctional, I needed to just change my mind sometimes. But what I teach is more just take the blocks out, and then you find yourself and you go out into the world and be a stunning individual with a lot of potential. Okay guys, so last minute, if you've got a question, do feel free to go for it. Otherwise I'll bring this stream to a close, and thank you all for listening. Have one last sip of my cup of tea. It's nice to do another live stream, and I do intend to pick up doing them fortnightly or so, because then they do support people. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you for tuning in, man. Cool, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in, and keep believing in yourself and keep doing the bioenergetics. It's very, very good for you. I will speak to you later.